Hi, good evening. My name is Tina Weiss, and I'm pleased to introduce the first of our Yeshiva University Library's Spring Book Talk series. Welcome, everyone, and those of you who attended our fall series of events, welcome back. Marcelo Broitman will discuss his book, Francisco Sánchez y el redescubrimiento de la duda en el Renacimiento. For those of us who don't speak Spanish, it roughly means Francisco Sánchez and the rediscovery of doubt in the Renaissance. Marcelo S. Broitman, PhD, was born in Argentina. He graduated in philosophy and social science in Buenos Aires and in Hispanic literatures in New York. The book to be discussed was published first in the US, and a second edition was recently published in Madrid, Spain. Ronnie Perelis, the Chief Rabbi Dr. Isaac Abraham and Yelena Alcalay, Associate Professor of Sephardic Studies at the Bernard Revel Graduate School here at Yeshiva University, will moderate the discussion. We want to thank JB Holderness for managing all things technology related for this event, and to thank Shalamis Hess, coordinator of the Yeshiva University Library's Book Talk series. Professor Perelis will moderate the questions at the end that people will submit. Please submit questions into the chat and have it set as default as everyone so that we can all see the questions. Please be sure to direct message, again, please direct the messages to everyone so that also Dr. Broitman can see them as well. And now, Professor Perelis.
Thank you very much, Tina. Thank you, Shalamis, for putting this together. Thank you, JB, for keeping the technical side all working always. And you know, I was honored to have a chance to be part of this series a couple years back when my book came out, and it's really just such a wonderful way to showcase all the really interesting things that are happening at YU, all on all our campuses. And it's great to have the library filled with activities, with sharing, with dialogue. And although Zoom has its advantages, I look forward to being in that room and having some tea and crackers afterwards with people in future dates. So I look forward to that. I want to just say also, it's a real honor to have a chance to interview and talk with Marcelo about his book. Marcelo and Graciela are legendary at YU. They've been teaching Spanish with love and with insight and with care for years. They were here before I came here, and they always, they always were welcoming. And to me, as a young professor who came in, and really, it's really great to be here. It's a beautiful book. Very elegantly written, very well organized. Much as I can say about Spanish philosophical writing, it's clear and lucid. And even someone who's not a specialist like myself was able to really get a lot out of this book. And I learned a lot about something I didn't know very much about at all. So it's, I want to say, and a very nice, handsome picture of Carlos Cuatro, no? No, Carlos Quinto? Who's on the cover?
Carlos Quinto.
Okay, yeah. You see the big Habsburg jaw. You can tell from any of these great paintings from the golden age of Spain. I want to start with just a very kind of big question, and you can take it as far or as short as you like. And that question is, who is Francisco Sánchez? Who was he? And what was the cultural world he was a part of? The book obviously explains it over the course of many chapters, but to the average person who's interested in philosophy, how would you describe a little bit about him? Introduce us to him.
Yes. And first of all, I want to thank you, Ronnie, for your very kind words and exaggeration, of course. Okay, Francisco Sánchez lived in the 16th and 17th century after the Common Era. He was born in Spain, in Galicia, in the northwest of Spain. He was the son of a physician. Judíos conversos, no? Convert Jewish. And he was born in Spain, but a few days later, he was baptized in Portugal. This is a mystery. Why? Probably because the family was escaping from Spain. Because this fact that he was born in a place and was baptized in the other, up to today, several centuries later, there is a discussion between the historians about where he really was born. Spain said that he is Spanish, Portugal that he is Portuguese. Okay, living in Portugal, he went to school. He was a very intelligent boy. He went to one of the most prestigious colleges in Portugal. And after some years, the family moved away and went to Bordeaux in France. No specific reasons, but we suppose that is because they were escaping from persecution or from possible dangers. No? The third country was France. And another problem, because also the French people say, no, we own him. Because three countries are disputing him. It's up to today, Spain, Portugal, and France. Anyway, he studied in Bordeaux about during 10 years in a very prestigious college. When he was about 10 years old, his father passed away. So he decided to travel to Italy, Rome. Rome was, in the time, the most important center of research in natural sciences, medicine, and he learned a lot there because the tradition of going directly to the nature. This is an important issue in the life of the time and in the life of Francisco Sánchez. The culture of the time was even at the end of the Middle Ages, no, the scholasticism. It means not science, theology, and use and strange use of the logic, the syllogism. Aristotle was the god in that time. But in Rome, he learned that it was possibly another situation. He had an immersion in the new researches, in the new investigation, and probably it changed his life. After 2 years, he returned to France, and he started his own life. Then he moved to another city in France, where he obtained the title of doctor in a very short time, very short time. And finally, he went to Toulouse, where he spent the rest of his life. This is like the bio of Sanchez, no? And the intellectual situation was this, no? The end of the Middle Ages, the beginning of the Renaissance, a revolution in the culture. And he was a main actor in this revolution, because in his book, he wanted to indicate that the all type of investigation was not investigation, was blah, blah, blah. It was really this. So he pushed to change. This is his importance. He was a promoter of the change in the time. Some people compare him with the god Janus, the god with two faces, one looking to the past and one to the present, because he was a type of not Janus. He was looking at the past that he hated and to the future that didn't exist yet, but that he was trying to change. This is the reason because he's in the history of the philosophy.
And how did you get interested in this figure? How did you find him? What drew you to spend so much time researching him and going into his life story, which is really fascinating? But there are a lot of fascinating people. So what about him drew you to him as a subject?
Well, it was the book is based in my doctoral dissertation in the City University of New York. The director of my dissertation, a very well-known person who passed away some years ago, because he knew my background in philosophy. He suggested me to write something not only about literature, but also about philosophy, a combination of all. I accepted, because I started studying this character, and I saw that it was very interesting because skepticism is something that I liked when I was in Argentina, because I used to teach epistemology. Okay, it was appropriate for me, and I dedicated several years, no, to study, to learn about this. So this is the reason, no? Somebody suggested me the topic, and I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. So, and this gets me to my next question, actually, which is, so this question of skepticism, one of the things that got me thinking when I was reading the book was that, you know, even defining what that is and what is the subject of the skepticism seemed to be somewhat particular to the time period. And could you explain a little bit, when you say skepticism and doubt, what are we talking about? What's the skepticism? What is the doubt? Is it the same thing as when we talk about having doubts about something? You know, or is there something unique to the time period that, you know, you need to kind of appreciate the details of that? You know, so if you can explain a little bit, what is skepticism for him, for Sanchez and his peers and his world?
An interesting question indeed. Yes, skepticism in the origin, the word skepticism means to look carefully, to pay attention to something. And in the old Greece, it originated as a philosophical school in the Hellenistic time, no? After the death of Plato and Aristotle, several schools started working in Athens. And one of them was the skepticism. This school is different from the others because they don't want to discover things about the world. They put in question the possibility of the knowledge. Can we human beings know the world? Of course not, of course, my friend. It's more difficult than what we suppose. They say the ingenious realism, the possibility to what I see is real. No, not in philosophy. In philosophy, they will discuss this up to the end. Mm-hmm. Because we perceive the world with our senses, but our senses are imperfect. The world is very complicated. things are changing all the time. They say, really, we can't know how the world is. The mythical founder of the school was Pyrrho of Elis in about the 3rd century before the Common Era. It's not sure that he existed or not, but it is in the tradition the head of the skepticism. He didn't read. He didn't write anything. So everything that is known about him is for other people. May I read you something? Sorry for this, but because it's difficult enough in order to be convenient to read. 2 minutes.
Perfect.
Apparently, Pyrrho, the founder, said, things are equally indifferent and unstable and indeterminate. Things change. For this reason, then, we should not trust them, but should be without opinions and without inclinations and without wavering. Saying about each single thing that it no more is than is not, or both is and is not, or neither is nor is not. Philosophy. He said, it's impossible to know the world. He was not the only person, the only philosophers are not normal people. You know? They live in their world, you know. It's impossible to know the world. We cannot say this computer is more than is not. But I see it. But maybe you are confused. Maybe it's not the same computer now, or in 2 more minutes. The strange word of the philosopher. But this is the basic definition of skepticism. Don't trust your senses. Don't think that you can know the world. But what to do? I need to live. Yes, you can have your normal life. But if it is winter, put something. They don't say, I don't feel cold or hot. Of course, I am sleeping on this. Yes, but in other things, the best is not to give an opinion. They call this in Greek epoche, suspension of judgment. This is the basic of course, skepticism. The basic skepticism.
Yeah.
Don't trust what you see, what you hear. It was a very important school that up to today, some people belong to the school. English was very important. There was 2 types of skepticism in Greece. The Pyrrhonism, for Pyrrho, are the academic, the academy, the school created by Platon, and later became also a skeptic school. Entonces, they have the Pyrrhonistic and the academics, two ways of the skepticism. Okay, in the Middle Ages, no. Middle Ages didn't like the doubt. what is the doubt, no? Doubt is not to be sure of anything, not to be sure of anything. I am Marcelo Broitman. Okay, I see my name here. I suppose that I am, but how can I be sure of this? My ID. Graciela, yes, but I am really convinced of it, depending on my paranoia, no? But this is the idea. How can we be sure of anything? But in the Middle Ages, they were totally dogmatic. This is the opposite of the skepticism. Up to today, in the state, you say, oh, you are dogmatic, you are skeptic. This couple existed in Greece, no? The Middle Ages didn't like this type of different opinions, different ideas. There are one truth that in Europe was the truth of the church, the Pope, the council. And in philosophy, the cult of Aristotle. Aristotle was a great philosopher, but in the Middle Ages, it was not a real Aristotle, it was a scholastic Aristotle, very far from the real one. And in the Renaissance, again, for different reasons, the skepticism started. Maybe because in the 15th, 16th century, somebody translated the words of Pyrrhon in Europe, and those people started reading them. The Renaissance of the philosophy, and one of the people who participated was our philosopher, no? Francisco Sánchez. Very, very long answer. I'm sorry, Ronnie.
No, but very clear. So, but I want to, if you can elaborate on one question, one piece of this, take it one step further. So, how does that form of skepticism? How do you apply that, let's say, to science? Because I mean, Sanchez, interestingly, for a philosopher, at least in the Christian world, this isn't strange in the Judeo-Islamic world in the medieval period, but in the Christian context, he's a physician who also is a very serious philosopher. So, so I'm curious about the scientific piece, and obviously medicine is very different than the more theoretical sciences. But does, how does that skepticism play in or apply in the scientific field?
Yes. Well, Sanchez was a medical doctor like his father and a philosopher. In the time, the two professions were connected, no? For example, the best Greek of the 2nd century after the Common Era, Sextus Empiricus, he was the best historian about Pyrrhon. He was a doctor, no? Sextus Empiricus, he was a medical doctor of the empirical school. And it was his last name, Sextus, the empirical physician. And at the same time, a philosopher. Galen, the father of the medicine, was, of course, a medical doctor, but also he wrote several books of philosophy. Now, the two professions are not very connected. But time ago, they are. And Sanchez, yes, he was, he earned his life working as a physician, but his vocation was the philosophy. Yes, and he wanted to use the skepticism to change the methodology of the medicine. Specifically, he said, so I want to use the philosophy, the skepticism, to go to a new medicine, not the old medicine full of superstitions, of astrology, in the Middle Ages, astrologists, not astronomers, astrologists, were also doctors because relating what happened with the moon and the sun in my body. So he said, okay, stop this. We need a new medicine. But yes, he tried to use this. Doubt in general is a philosophical concept, no? But he also wanted to use this to improve the medicine of his time. Yes. Yeah.
So there's a question from Tina Weiss, which I think is perfect right here. So you explained a little bit about science and medicine, how this is applied. What about mathematics? Did he deal with mathematics? Did he engage in those questions? Did it help in some way change also the way people were thinking about mathematics at the time?
You're asking me a difficult question, my dear Ronnie Perelis.
It's not me, Tina. It's on Tina.
Tina, no, mathematics is different, but not totally. The deductive sciences have their own land. They don't change like the real world. But Sanchez, even there to question some things of the mathematics. He is considered the more drastic skeptic of the time. Even in a letter that he sent to a mathematician, Clavius, letter that was ignored for centuries, was discovered not a short time ago. Apparently, he asked for advice to Clavius, an important mathematician, and he even questioned some things of the mathematics, of the deductive methodology. But anyway, is the place where it's more difficult to be skeptic. But not totally. Mathematics, logic, is the philosophical sister of the mathematics. The logic is the same, is deductive, but not everybody accepts what the logic said. No? Some philosophers, even very intelligent people, they discuss some basics in mathematics, in logic. But anyway, he was more interested in the natural sciences, no? Because as a physicist, a doctor. But yes, it's possible, but it's not the common situation to question the truth of the deductive sciences. The natural sciences are more apt to be discussed.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I want to go a little bit more into his biography. There's more to talk about his philosophy, but I want to make sure we have time to talk about it because I think there's clearly a lot of interest. Many of the people in his fellow circles, people like Juan Luis Vives and others, share this converso past. It's far from clear at all that they share any sort of secret Jewish practice or belief, right? I mean, those two things don't go together. But is there something about, this is a thesis that many intellectual historians have made about the conversos, which kind of lead up to Spinoza being kind of the great example of this, of, you have these intellectuals who are set off somehow from their wider society because of this converso past. And perhaps that sets them apart and allows them to see things differently, right? That their peers may feel more confident and comfortable moving on with the received wisdom, and they're able to buck the trend because of something in their biography. What do you make of that? And how do you see that here? Do you see something, a trace of the converso, which is kind of putting him in that direction? And I saw, I mean, from reading the book, I saw that you clearly, are aware of a lot of those historical controversies. I'm curious what you think about it.
Yes, the Judaism of Francisco Sánchez was not very evident. You said Juan Luis Vives, no? Yes. Another Jewish convert, new Christian, yes, a little before Francisco. Those were the most important minds in the time, those from Spain. In the case of Vives, yes, practically all his family was burned at the stake, by the nice Inquisition. Without 10 members of his family, including Vives' father, the rest of the Vives' mother, because she passed away before they were burned, when she was in France. He was born in Spain, he were there some years, and one day he went to Spain and to Britain, and he never more returned to Spain for obvious reason. Maybe Vives dedicate a little more time to discuss the problematic of the Christianism or Judaism. He wrote even a book, Vives, about the excellencies of the Christian faith. And apparently he preferred the Christianism and not the Judaism. But they were in the time of the Inquisition, no? They need to pay attention to what they said. In the case of returning to our philosopher Sánchez, he never apparently said anything about his Judaism. Or there is a discussion up to today. What was he? Maybe he was not very interested in religion. A skeptic philosopher, usually very rationalistic people, they cannot dedicate a long time to see things like God, the salvation, the afterlife. And he really didn't dedicate a lot of time, Sancho, no? He did several investigations in medicine, and he developed a book about the impossibility of knowledge. Apparently, he was a good Catholic. Was he or not? Impossible to know. The historians say what he felt in his heart, but because he needed to pay attention to the political situation of the time, he never said openly, yes, I am Jewish. And people even thought that he was an old Christian because of his behavior, because he never said anything, or because he felt comfortable being Christian, or because he wanted to be alive, no?
Right.
And the fact that, and I will surprise you, he had several children. Two of his sons were ecclesiastics, member of orders ecclesiastic in the church, and one daughter entered in the Ursuline convent. Three of the children were very good Catholics. Entonces, for the Catholic historian, it is the total proof that he felt as a real Catholic. And maybe, or he was hidden his feelings. Impossible to know.
Mhm.
But in his life, apparently he didn't have problems. Maybe because he didn't express anything. Maybe the father, the family, felt something when they from Spain went to Portugal, from Portugal went to France, but he didn't put in writing anything about this, Sanchez. Some Jewish historians wanted to prove that he was really a Jew. But where is it? One of them counted in the main book of Sanchez, no, that nothing is known. The times that he copied sentences from the Bible.
Mhm.
Because he discovered that he put only 2 sentences from the New Testament and 8 from the Tanakh, from the Old Testament. Mathematically, he was more Jewish than Catholic. It's not a proof, no? It's the desire to say, yes, he was really Jewish. I'm sorry, Ronnie, I can't give a more clear answer, but he never manifested openly, clearly, that he wanted to be Jewish for one reason or the other. And apparently, his children didn't feel Jewish.
Right.
But anyway, all the books say that he was from a Marrano family. He was, I suppose that he needed to accommodate to the situation. He wanted to do a revolution, but in science, in philosophy, not political, not religious.
Mhm. So I want to, yeah, you know, you're tracing this. This is something that, you know, I deal with in the people I work on. You know, that just because, you know, you follow certain sociological, cultural, economic patterns doesn't make you one thing or another. And that's, you see that with Sanchez in terms of his geographical patterns, where they move, you know, the move from Portugal to Spain to southern France. Many Portuguese New Christians moved there because it was tolerant and they would be able to kind of continue their, but there were a small group of people who actually secretly kept Judaism. And then plenty of people who, just like you're describing, like Sanchez, live their lives as Catholics, right? I mean, you point out he was in Italy for many years. He could have left Rome and gone to a place where there were other New Christians who came back to Judaism. He doesn't do those things, which, you know, it's still interesting, right, that you have him and many others in his circle who have this background. What's going on with that background? So I want to ask 2 questions. One is a very, I guess, a more quantitative question, which is, does he actually ever cite, again, not in a Jewish way, but just in terms of his citation, does he ever go to any of the medieval philosophers like Maimonides or Ralbag, like Gersonides, you know, some of these very obviously very important philosophers that Christians were well aware of and Christians were engaging with. So does he quote them? Does he cite them? And that's, you know, that's a quantitative question. Then I'll have a different qualitative question next. But yeah.
If you ask me if he have read Maimonides or the other Jewish people important. He never mentioned it. In his books, he never mentioned Maimonides or other rabbis. No.
Mhm.
So really, he looked as an old Christian, or he was not interested, or he wanted to be alive some
Yeah,
more time.
right. I mean, right. The Inquisition
Yes.
makes this a difficult game, right?
So,
Yeah.
as you said, yes, his family, his father, etc., went to France because in the time in France the situation was better for the Jews, no? A lot of Spanish and Portuguese Jews went to France. They had all the possibilities, all the benefits. But anyway, it's difficult to know why from Bordeaux he went to another and finally to the last destination in France. And in this last destination where he spent a lot of years and he passed away there, the problem was different. The problem was between Catholic and Huguenots, no? The Protestant.
Right.
Entonces, Jews were not very important in the situation. Two Catholic sects were having a war between them. And some historians say maybe he felt more sympathy for Catholic than for the Huguenots because he decided to stay in this sect, not in the other. He needed to choose one. Okay, I am a Catholic, I will continue being Catholic. And he was buried in a Christian place, no? In a Église de Cordeliers, the Franciscans church in the city. He was a perfect Christian, apparently, yes. I'm sorry if I disappoint you. I cannot say, oh, he was a great Jew. I wanted to see this, but apparently it was not very important in his life, or he was very prudent, no?
Or incredibly secretive about it, yeah. There's a question from Will Stenhouse, which, like I said, it's a little bit more of a qualitative question, and it relates to seeing, could you see, asking if, is there a parallel between the sort of stepping back from society to observe it more critically that you see in Montaigne? Do you see that happening with him? You know, there's this. Also, we know that Montaigne has a converso background. You know, it's further back and it's less direct, but it's definitely a presence. And again, I don't think people would claim that Montaigne was a secret Jew, but that there's something in that mentality of being like an insider outsider, being somewhat removed, that allows you then to be skeptical or to be more critical of what you see. Do you see any of those connections, Montaigne? Did they know each other? Also, just very practically.
Apparently, they did not meet, but some historians say that they had a family relation. Yes, between Montaigne and Sanchez. Maybe yes, maybe not. But yes, both were skeptics. Montaigne more soft, maybe because his life was better, he was richer, and the skepticism of Sanchez was more passionate, no? he was the most, people say the most extremist, I forget, skeptic in his century.
Yeah.
A very famous scholar from Spain, Marcelino Menéndez Pelayo, a genius, 19th and 20th century. He compared both a little, and he said, yes, but the skepticism of Montaigne was a skepticism of the pillow. When I go to sleep comfortable in my luxury palace, and I say, oh, the problems of the world, what difficult is to know the world. The other, no, the other was fire, no? He wanted to burn all the science of the time. But if we want to see something Jewish, not Jewish, but something maybe Jewish in Sanchez. For example, he wrote two books, no, and several researches. One of the books was about a comet that showed in the skies in Europe, and the other was his most important book, the Declaration of Skepticism, called That Nothing is Known. No? In both books, especially in the book about the comet, he expressed some pantheistic view. It is, he talked about the nature with love, always put nature with capital letter. And some critics say, maybe he thinks that nature is equivalent to God. This is what they call a pantheism. And our more famous philosopher, Spinoza, was clearly a pantheist. Was there any relation, not between them, of course, but is the pantheism, is the association with the nature and God, Jewish value, Jewish characteristic? I don't know. But two well-known Jewish philosophers had this type of concept to identify the world, the nature with God. But this is the most that we can say in order to prove that something Jewish was in him. No? Right. He shared some feeling with Spinoza.
So I want to, this leads me to what I think is the last question, unless something else pops up in the window before where we wrap up. And this is about his legacy, the impact he had, because clearly, you know, the world we live in of science is not the world of inherited ideas and what, you know, even in Sanchez's time would have seen as superstitions, right? There's a sense of, you know, empiricism is so important and trial and not accepting what you see, right? And really investigating. So it's clearly, we live in the world that he probably would have been happy with scientifically. And the question is, you know, can you explain that impact? How did that happen? Was it direct? Did later philosophers and scientists discover him? You know, did he have a direct impact? I mean, he was at the time clearly seen as this important skeptic, but you know, what happened with that idea? And if you kind of, you know, what was the impact going forward?
In his time and in the legacy, yes, in his time he was very well known and important. He was considered an extremist, 100% skeptic. But when the cult of Aristotle finished, the skepticism practically finished. Entonces, and he dedicated a complete book, this more important book, to attack Aristotle and his concepts. And when he didn't have an enemy to attack, the interest in Sanchez declined. Anyway, the historians say that he had an impact in other people. For example, in René Descartes. Practically all the historians accept that Descartes had the influence of Sanchez. Some people say that all Descartes is Sanchez. Some people only 10%, depending on the different historian. No? Yes, in my book I put something that looks clear, something that said Sanchez, that there are a lot of opinions in the world. Philosophy is full of opinions, but what can we do with a lot of opinions? Because only one can be true. And Descartes will say the same. From several opinions, people say, oh, you see, he's following Sanchez. Even the famous cogito ergo sum, I think, then I am, the Descartes. Some historians say he took this from Sanchez because Sanchez said something similar. Yes, he has a legacy. Some people from Spain, for example, Menendez y Pelayo, very nationalistic in Spain, he wrote a very important article indicating that not only Descartes, practically all the philosophers of the modernity depended of Sanchez. It's an exaggeration, no? It's a Spanish propaganda. This. No one thinks that Immanuel Kant received the influence of Sanchez, but he said so. Depending on what you're feeling, he had an impact in a lot of people, only in a few people, maybe in one people, or in after his time, he was forgotten. Up to now, now no one knows Francisco Sánchez. He was more famous in his time than now.
Right.
Even in his time, some literary writers talk about him. No, two quotation famous. One from Miguel de Cervantes, and the other from Quevedo, two of the most important Spanish writers. They both put a very favorable concept about Francisco Sánchez. Unfortunately, now no writer talks about him, and only in the history of philosophy you can find a reference to Sanchez. No? He was famous in his century. I don't know if I am answering your question.
No, very well. In fact, there was, I don't know her first name, Helen Cantor? I'm not sure. H. Cantor added a great question here. A great question and a comment, which one of the things that is just, it's just a nature of intellectual history is that so much, oh, Haley, thank you. So much of what we think of as modern philosophy, we think of it as a French and a German and an English phenomenon. But if you change your lens just a little, if you expand it out a little bit, the Iberian piece of it and the Italian piece of it is essential. I mean, you can't, You just have to put your, right? I mean, Will is nodding, so I'm happy about that. Because, you know, this is the period he understands, and he understands, you know, there was a scholarly elision, right? And a blindness to it because of you write from where you live. And people just don't know about these people because it's 50 years before they started reading, you know, they read Descartes and they think that's where modern philosophy begins. But what are the roots of these things? So that's why work on people like, I mean, personalities like this give you a sense of you know, how much wider the networks are. And also, one of the things, again, I really appreciate from the book is that Professor Broitman takes us all the way back to Pyrrho and to the early, you know, these early debates in Greece, and you see how they evolve over time, and how they become relevant again, even as, to a great extent, like Professor Broitman said, he was looking to kill Aristotle, right? He was looking to just knock him off the pedestal, make him one more philosopher among mortals, and let's go to a new stage. And I thought that's such an amazingly interesting point that you make at the end, that you made today, that, you know, once Aristotle's out, then there's no more fight, right? You know, so his relevance succeeds. Yeah.
Yes, I thought that in order to talk about Sanchez, it was necessary to go back to the origin of skepticism and to see some development, yes, up to right. It's not, it's difficult to understand, no, what is skepticism, what happened with him. He was considered, for example, a Pyrrhonist, like the first famous skeptic, no? Pyrrhon. Because with the differences of the case, that he followed the old Greece school. Apparently, he had read the Greek. He read different things. He read, for example, a very important book of Vives, no, that I mentioned in my work. Vives wrote a book in pseudo-dialecticos against the dialectic, the logic of the Middle Ages. That was a joke, was not something serious. And he studied all the sophism, a lot of sophism he's trying to explain. And Sanchez read all of this, and he was furious. He said, this is not science, this is garbage. We need to begin from the beginning. And this is something that Descartes will say, we need to begin from the beginning. Other thing that people attribute to Sanchez, to recreate the philosophy. We are in 0 point. We will need to begin again. The old philosophy was very important, but centuries of Middle Ages, ignorance, fake dialectics, very, very important. Yes, he continued a tradition, and after him, maybe was a tradition or not, depending if you are a fan of Sanchez or not. No? Not all the historians say the same about his legacy.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to the library for creating the space. It's been really a very stimulating evening for me, and the whole experience of reading the book and thinking about these ideas has been very, very enriching. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Always is a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes.
Always that I chat with you, I learn a lot because you are an encyclopedia.
No.
A walking encyclopedia. Yes, thank you. And I want to thank all of you for the interest and the patience about my book, no? And it was an honor for me that you invited me to here and to talk with Ronnie Perelis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcelo, and thank you, Ronnie, for this stimulating discussion about Marcelo's recent book. And I want to thank everyone who has attended. Our next talk will be with Professor Nakama Price on her book, Tribal Blueprints. And please stay tuned for more publicity and information on that. Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye.